Hey, so if you've clicked on this video, I'm assuming you're already familiar with the story that is Berserk. And like I've mentioned in past videos, Berserk is a story that's changed my life in multiple ways. And one of these big changes occurred for me while reading Wounds 1 and 2, which are the chapters where Guts and Casca finally, get together. And personally, these chapters, in my opinion, are the single greatest examples of how relationships, sex, trauma, PTSD, and overall healing can affect someone. And how through love, you can get past any obstacle. This chapter taught me a lot about life, and is one that still affects me every single day, even though I read Berserk years ago. So that being said, today I will take a deep dive into these chapters and analyze what makes them so amazing. Now, I'm not going to actually read the chapter off to you, that'd be really boring. Instead, I'm going to pick a decent amount of moments and interactions that I find very impactful, but bear with me as I can't really show many of these. Now, the first thing I want to speak about is this first panel from Wounds 1, where Casca thinks back to the time when Guts left the Band of the Hawk, and in turn, left her. And in a lot of ways, I find this first panel very fascinating. And the first major part of this panel that I just love is the idea that Griffith had given her the life she has. And while this may seem very surface level, at first you'll come to understand that this simply isn't true. Griffith didn't give her anything really. The whole point of their first encounter, where Griffith quote-unquote saves her from the man, was that she was fighting for herself. When Griffith tosses the sword to her, the exact line he says, "If you have something to protect, take up that sword," showing that Griffith didn't give her pride. He didn't give her a reason to live. He didn't give her who she was. She always had pride, and she always had her reason. And this contradiction inside of Casca's heart is very, very important for the rest of these chapters. But we'll get to that at the end of the video, and I mean the very end. So for now, just try and keep this idea in the back of your mind. See, Casca has always been wrong about Griffith, and Griffith never had anything to take away from her or give her in the first place. But for now, with that in the back of your mind, let's move on to the bulk of these chapters, which is Guts and Casca. One of the best parts regarding Guts and Casca's relationship, specifically at the start of these chapters, is the immediate and rapid amount of emotion and just overall sense of confusion regarding this event. To start, Casca speaks about how she's worried that this will change her, and in turn, Guts speaks about how he feels like a coward. See, a major part about these chapters is how honest and open Guts and Casca are with one another, in every single way imaginable. And this honesty that they display while they're most vulnerable is extremely real, and it's just super realistic. If you've ever been in a situation like this, you know that this is how it always is. And this isn't just like a 1-2 and bang, they're together like it's portrayed in most media. They are both absolutely terrified. Furthermore, a ton of emphasis is placed here on Casca's emotional state while this is happening. And I just love this because in modern media, I feel like no one portrays the emotional state of a woman during events like this. And I also love how Guts is kind of awkward, represented by him accidentally embarrassing Casca while talking about her scars, even though he didn't really mean to. But I also love that he saves himself. Like, it's just so funny. Like, he genuinely loves her so much. And for the most part, even though they're very awkward, especially Guts, it seems like this is gonna go perfectly fine because they just have such amazing chemistry. Until they don't, and until it doesn't end up going perfectly fine. See, we're made to understand something very, very quickly. This is not a normal run-of-the-mill scene regarding this kind of content. Because all of a sudden, Guts isn't being very gentle. And when he hears Casca cry, something in him just gives. Guts' PTSD and trauma from being SA just hits him like a freight train, and he is just stunned. all of his pain, all of his fear, all of his anger, every single emotion and feeling that he buried so deep inside of him that he almost nearly forgot about its existence as a whole, comes crashing right onto the panels. Because for the first time in over 10 years, he finally lets his guard down. And in the heat of this moment, he chokes her. And fearing that he had done the same exact thing that broke him so many years ago, Guts breaks. Again. Crying, shaking, and having a full-blown anxiety attack, Guts finally lets everything out. And with Casca totally confused and concerned, he finally tells someone everything. He tells her about Donovan and how he took advantage of Guts, how Guts murdered him. However, when she mistakes this for Gambino, Guts gets defensive, which shows that after all of this time, he still can't accept that Gambino was the man that could do this to him. He just can't believe that his father figure, the man he loved, the man he looked up to, the man he wanted to be, could cause him so much pain. But in this moment, he finally accepts it. He accepts that Gambino was the monster, that it wasn't his fault. And then he continues, explaining every single harsh and graphic detail to Casca, every emotion and every moment. And then for the first time in the series, we hear Guts say, sorry. He says sorry to Gambino, in turn saying sorry to Casca, and for the first time, he's saying sorry to himself. This man who can cut down monsters is just sorry. And when Guts is at his lowest, at his most vulnerable, literally naked in every sense of the word, finally, someone's there to support him. Casca is there to support him, hugging him and embracing him, flaws and all. And for the first time, someone's choosing him. And on top of that, Casca is finally making a choice for herself. She's not manipulated or pushed into loving him, such as Charlotte, which is a whole parallel on its own, but that's for another video. But on the topic of Griffith, the last few panels after Casca makes this decision are all about Griffith. For example, her lines here state, "Maybe my place is within this man's heart, not just being given to, but being able to give something as well." Showing that for the first time in her life, Casca isn't being used by someone. She's not a tool, she's not an object, and she's not some sort of toy that you can just move around whenever you feel the time is right. She's real, she's human, and she's alive. And this idea of just your soul healing, just personified in Casca, just pours out onto the pages and in turn pours out onto Guts, represented through what is, in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest panel in Berserk. With Guts dozing off, for some reason, he recalls himself as a young boy putting on the medicine that Gambino had given to him, with laying next to him an oversized sword. And in a rare moment, Miura spells out for you literally what this scene means, stating that for the first time since he was a wee lad, Guts is being cared for. He's finally healing. He's safe and comfortable, with Casca being his medicine and his sword, with Casca being his heart, not dull and filled with blood like it usually is, but dimly shining, showing signs of beauty. But that's not the ending of this chapter like a lot of people for some reason think it is. See, there's one more image at the very bottom of the next page, and you guessed it, it's Griffith. He's beaten, he's bloody, he's sweating, and he is in the absolute worst shape we have ever seen him in till this point. And I just find it very interesting that our main character and the main love interest, main female lead, while they are healing and in the best mental and emotional state they have ever been in, our antagonist is being destroyed. And this is very symbolic of while our main characters are building themselves up, Griffith's issue is he never healed. He never went through this process that Guts and Casca have just been through. Instead of dealing and coping and working through his trauma, he just decided to smother it and give in to his darkest desires. And that is why the scene where he makes his way into Charlotte's room just feels so uncomfortable in comparison to wounds 1 and 2. Unlike Guts and Casca, that scene isn't natural. It's not flowy. There's no chemistry between the two. They don't even know each other. Contrasted to Guts and Casca that are just a match made in like heaven. And I think this chapter at the end is a perfect embodiment of the consequences of not properly healing and instead trying to force things into a way that you think will be good instead of just letting it naturally happen. And just to wrap this video up, what really makes wounds 1 and 2 so special to me and so many other people, and why I even decided to make this analysis, is just because if you've been in any kind of similar situation to Guts and Casca, you know that their reactions and their emotional state and just the dialogue and everything regarding their interactions this chapter make perfect sense and are very realistic. Sort of mentioned this in previous videos, but a lot of the issues taking place in Wounds 2 and a lot of the things that they're experiencing and talking about and working through are issues that I've had to deal with for a very, very long time. And before reading Wounds 2, I didn't know how to properly express and properly open up about these emotions that I was having. And because of this chapter, it gave me the motivation, gave me the courage to finally speak about things that I never thought I would have the courage to speak about. And just as a piece of advice to anyone who's read Berserk or read these chapters or is listening to this video, if you have any amount of trauma, it doesn't even have to be related to SA or anything related to anything that happened in these chapters, you need to speak to someone about it. I'm not saying just go and tell a random person, but you need to talk about these things. You need to talk about these feelings and you need to work through them. And that is the beauty of this story. What makes Berserk and what makes these chapters specifically so beautiful is the fact that the way they speak could really happen, and is a great way that you should go about healing. I think that's why Miura leaves us with Guts and Casca, as Casca being Guts' medicine, in the final panels of these chapters, showing that medicine and healing come in any kind of shape or form, but the most important thing is that you are actively seeking out healing, which is portrayed masterfully with the final panel on the next page being Griffith all alone, surrounded by darkness, just absolutely destroyed because he never properly healed.